Hello and welcome back to the Boatyard for another exciting edition of Dave Talks Too Much Without Actually Doing Much Work, or so it would seem from some of the comments. So if you don't like me chit-chatting away, bad luck, it's another one you're not going to like. If you didn't see the previous video, it's probably worth having a look at that. I don't literally mean the previous one on my channel, the previous one in this sequence. I'll leave a link to it in the video description below, where I set about the back of the boat with the multi-tool, cutting away, only to discover that I hadn't quite cut away at the right point, so I now need to do some more cutting. A couple of people pointed out that there are some bolts on the back here that will need to come off the boat first, and they're probably bolted through. You are quite right, they are bolted through, and having cleared everything from the back cabin out and into the front cabin and pulled all the cushions out and so on, I can actually see those bolts. Now, one of them was not held with any actual bolts on the bolts, you know, nuts on the bolts. It was just through, so I could just hit it with a hammer and it would start coming out backwards. The other one actually had some 13mm bolts on, so I've had to unscrew those and again take a hammer to it. They're quite firmly through the transom. But we're beginning to have progress. The bolts actually did... It's rusted so much. The wood's so rotten, the bolt has rusted, leaving just rust in the hole. Look at that. That's the old bolt. Oh well, look at that. That was a solid bolt. I had a few people in the comments on the last video saying why, if I started off the video saying I needed to cut in by about 2 inches, did I not cut in by 2 inches on these sides here? Because it didn't matter here. I needed a 2-inch gap along the bottom to scarf, I've learned a new term, to scarf new fiberglass in on the bottom. But as I explained in that video, I was always going to wrap new fiberglass round these corners anyway, so I didn't need that 2-inch gap, because the whole side of the boat becomes the bit that I was going to put new fiberglass onto. Now, as it turns out, I did need to cut back further in because the wood in the transom doesn't actually come all the way to the edge of the boat, but I didn't know that at the time. So that's why I needed to cut further in, with the benefit of glorious hindsight, not because it actually needed it for the scarfing the new fiberglass in. And then the reason I cut directly along the top of the transom line, again, is because I was under the, we now know, mistaken impression that the transom went all the way to the top. But also, these edges around here, again, I showed they were just crumbly and grumbly and full of some kind of filler. So even though I've cut them out and it turns out that's single layer fiberglass straight through into the back cabin, I needed to cut those out anyway. I was going to Dremel them out because they were all crumbly and falling apart anyway. So the fact that that is not actually into where the transom bit is, which is again a further centimetre below that, you've got fiberglass, bit of filler, another bit of fiberglass, then the transom starts. So I'm going to have to cut another line here. But I was always going to cut these bits out anyway, which would have taken me through to the cabin, because they were all falling apart. I showed that in a previous video. They're all just grotty, horrid yuck. So they were going to come out anyway, so it doesn't really matter, in a sense. I should probably stop rabbiting, shouldn't I? Yes, David, yes, stop rabbiting, and do some more cutting. That's what we're here for. As Alice once said in Wonderland, curiouser and curiouser. I needed to do some exploratory digging, and it has shown very strange construction behind here. Obviously this is very soggy wood. It really is soggy. I mean, that's just, it's like a trampoline that is underneath my finger. But the actual end of it seems to be here, quite a long way in a diagonal line from there down to the bottom. That is single but quite thick original skin through to the cabin behind, and down here a void that I couldn't get to from the inside cabin. I thought it was some sort of flotation void, but there's nothing in there. It's empty. Maybe it was supposed to be filled with foam or something. And then down here there's a very complicated structure which I can't really make out, but it's a sort of another angled shape. And it looks like, I mean, you'd think that would be some sort of bearer. It's clearly a structural cross piece, which I haven't cut. I've just cut the fiberglass off the top of it. But that, I think, is forming a structure like that. Something like that. Anyway, this doesn't need to come any further out, because that is just end skin of boat. This is the actual grotty wood that I need to scrape out. It's kind of progress. You may not think it, but as far as I'm concerned, this is all going remarkably well. Lots of lovely soggy wood to remove, bits of transom coming off, a general better understanding of how this thing was constructed. This is splendid. Will you look at the moisture when you squish the hammer against there? It's just soggy underneath the hammer. Well, I have had lunch, I've had a cup of tea, courtesy of a friendly neighbour who happened to have tea and a kettle and all the supplies, and the batteries for the equipment are now recharging. Yes, recharging, so I can actually crack on this afternoon. What I've discovered is the transom was definitely made of two chunks of plywood stuck together. The top one absolutely sodden, came off straight away. The bottom one drier as you get through it, so it's actually being a little more resistant to coming out. And also the two chunks of plywood were nailed together with hordes of little steel nails, which I keep catching myself and the multi-tool on, but it will come out. It's just going to take a little bit of work, and then actually I think it's going to be I've said this before, a fairly straightforward job. Put some new wood in, and then even the fiberglassing actually now looks more realistic proposition than it did when I started, because I can see how I'm going to do it. So I'm pretty optimistic. Unfortunately, this is the last sunny day for a while. The forecast for the weekend and the whole week ahead is just torrential rain. So I'm going to get done what I can do today, and then I think it might be a while before I'll be able to get back and do anything else, especially if it needs to involve the fiberglass resin, because that needs to be at a reasonable temperature for it to cure, of course. And as we are heading into winter, that reasonable temperature may not happen. I am a little way into this now, and steady albeit slow progress is being made. A combination of using the hammer, and I don't have a chisel, so I'm having to use a flathead screwdriver underneath here and hammering that through to loosen the backboard off. Unfortunately, this inner skin of fiberglass is very, very thin compared to the outer skin, which is a good 6mm, 5 or 6mm. This inner one is thin, and as I'm trying to pry it away, I fear I may end up cracking that inner skin. So I think I will probably have to put a new layer of glass down on that before I then start putting new transom wood in. And the other thing I'm doing is using the multi-tool with a flat blade on it, a bit like a sheep shearer, just kind of going underneath the edge to loosen everything up, then putting the screwdriver down, then loosening a bit more and just peeling the bits away. But it seems to be working. Well, I have pretty much had enough for the day, but I am making good progress. As you can see, that is back to the fiberglass interior, which as expected is really quite thin and has holes in it. Those two holes from that metal bracket I took off earlier. Goodness only knows what these two holes are for. There wasn't anything through them, but clearly they need filling. And then it's so thin in trying to get the wood off, I appear to have gone through this bit here. And I'm not quite sure yet. I need to have a look from the inside, whether I can see that from the inside or not. Anyway, I think what I will end up doing once I've got the rest of the old Transmat is putting a new layer of fiberglass on this to start with, so as to reinforce that back up again, and then I can fill these holes from the other side. Then we'll do 2 layers of marine ply thoroughly soaked in resin to make it waterproof, and then fiberglass over the back again. There's a weird hole in the fiberglass here, but underneath that you can see there is one of the actual bearers that is effectively what the engine is pushing against when it pushes the boat forward, because this is no sort of push at all. It's the solid bits here it's pushing against, and down the bottom, and also on this corner here. So just need to neatening up, bit of fiberglass. May need to buy some extra glass. I wasn't planning on doing that, but anyway, that's easily achievable. And yeah, when that'll happen, no idea, but it's definitely doable. So thank you for watching. Cheerio!